Guys, it's time for some game theory.
Greetings and salutations. Eric Garland here. This is Game Theory Today, live Thursday, February 19th in the evening here in the Republic of Vermont, sovereign since 1777. What a day, guys. What a wonderful time that we have going here now. And there's just one image that sort of sums up today. And this is Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, the former Duke of York, former Prince of the realm in the United Kingdom. I'm American, so I don't know all the different titles or what they mean. I just know what this the expression on this guy's face means, and we're going to talk about it a little bit today. It's a special day because, of course, we're in the midst of the beginning of the criminal wrap-up of the Epstein network, of everybody that went to that guy for advice on dating or offshore money laundering or trafficking children or treason or whatever. Those guys are all having to pay the piper right about now. And we have this lovely photo from Evening Time in Britain. And Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor was taken into custody by British police today. He was not charged with any crime in particular, though it is pursuant to an investigation on abuse of his official duty. So this is much less about the minor sex trafficking victims who, don't worry, we'll get there. But the events apparently that they're investigating go back to just after the financial crisis, where then Prince Andrew was the official trade representative for the United Kingdom, and he was trafficking confidential, if not classified, information straight to Jeffrey Epstein as soon as he got his hands on it. And this involved British companies. This involved sensitive trade plans for the whole United Kingdom. Jeffrey Epstein, of course, is not a British subject. He is not a citizen of the United Kingdom. He had no right to that. He was not part of any government. And, oh, yes, he was a convicted child trafficker already. And yet, the Prince of England here, Duke of York, Prince Andrew, was giving him basically real-time access to his official duties as trade representative. And that is what he was dragged into court over. And that is just one subset of crimes. And I'm really looking forward to this corporate espionage stuff, or straight up espionage, because the statutes are different in every country on these things. But, you know, I've long thought that these two sets of crimes needed to go together to really understand what these types are up to, the deleterious effect that they have had on our society. You've got to get this story across to the average person so they understand it. And it's tough because the ugliness of the violence that they've done towards innocent people, the stories are so grotesque. They may be almost supernaturally grotesque. You could almost not imagine that other human beings would be capable of evil on this scale. The stories of children and of brute violence, that will get across the severity of how bad these people are. However, that's really taxing to the mind. It's really hard to think about these stories. Guys, I've been on this beat. I've been studying this as part of my real work in intelligence for years. And I can tell you that you pay a price to learn about stuff that is this dark and this upsetting. So too with for anyone else who wants to understand it. And one of the things that I study in the field of intelligence is cognitive bias and what makes people want to learn something, what holds them back from understanding something. And there's a variety of psychological phenomena that will get in the way of people learning and taking the lessons from the information they get. As I was saying on a webinar with my colleagues earlier today, there is nothing less valuable that I do as an intelligence person than being right. I can be right all day long. It's not very valuable. If I can get you to think differently, if I can get you to change your mind about something, and you'll take different types of actions, perhaps more beneficial for you and your stakeholders and your family and friends, that, my friend, that's useful. So talking about the ugly stuff with these elites, that'll get the point across, but it's really taxing. It's really hard. But the corporate espionage, the tax evasion, the money laundering, the cheating, that is something we all understand. And we've all seen enough movies with rich, snotty, particularly British bad guys. This is not going to be so hard to get across to people. So we're unfurling stories of these different characters, and we've got to get across to the people of the world that there are criminals in our midst, some of whom were put in positions of great authority and trust, and they abused that trust. So how do we get this across to people so that they make better decisions about their democracies? And and where do we go from here? That is what we are looking at here tonight, because this is a great way to get started. This photo of Andrew's, this is a great way to get the ball rolling. So I'm going to go to a couple of questions here, because that is what we are here to do on the Game Theory Today live version. Our man Neil over in the UK, who's giving us the straight dope from there. He came back from Dublin tonight. Good to see you, good sir. Not a good day for the swamp, but a win for justice. Good evening. And that look of ooh feck by Andrew. Yeah, it's he looks like he's had a better day here. Dwayne C asks, who do you figure is next? I'd put money on Mandelson, who of course pushed for Andrew to be the UK's trade envoy. I think we're just at the beginning of this, right? And I think Mandelson is obviously one of the central players here. So he has been dealt with good and early, right? Who's next? We just had Wexner, who was a partner of Epstein's out of the state of Ohio, Les Wexner, I believe the wealthiest man in Ohio. He was deposed just by the Democrats in his home. So this is from the U.S. Congress. I believe it was the Oversight Committee. The Oversight Democrats went to take his deposition. They offered to let the chair and the party that controls that committee, the Republicans, they offered them the chance to go to the deposition with them, to take his testimony under oath. My understanding is that the Republicans did not go along with this. And just the Democrats asked questions. And Wexner said that, he was duped. He was tricked. This Epstein guy was wily and stole money from him. And I don't believe him. Of course, Wexner bought Jeffrey Epstein the biggest single individual home in Manhattan, I think, which used to be a boarding school. Yeah, yuck. It was a boarding school that Epstein got a hold of. And before that, it had this property on the east side of Manhattan. It had a weird history with the State Department, leased it out, and it had to do with the Iranians. I forget all the details. You know, you start with all the gross stuff with Epstein and the famous people that you've heard of, and you get very quickly into Iranian arms dealing. You get right into the Soviets very quickly. You get offshore stuff. You get Cypriots, Maltese, Central America, Air America, drug dealing. I mean, it is sort of, every crappy 90s thriller of government intrigue. That's the Epstein story. That's all the guy did all day long, is stuff like that. So who might be next to actually get arrested? I have no idea. I think to go back to the photo here, I think this is all extremely well timed. I think it is all playing out based on a calendar, right? And I think the reason that you put you arrest Andrew at his home is to change the dynamic in all of the other prosecutions you're gonna have to do. What you want to do when you're prosecuting is you want the defendant, especially if you know you got the right guy, which you should, right? You want the defendant to plead guilty, to say, stop, I'll plead to a lesser charge, or I'll plead right now. I did it. And you save everybody the time of going to trial, which can take a year or two. You're saving a lot of government resource. Sometimes you're saving the victims when there's a crime that has a definite victim. You're saving the victims being cross-examined on the stand in court. That it's better. And I believe somewhere north of I think 90% plus of U.S. federal prosecutions. I can't speak as to French, German, Dutch, British, Japanese, legal system, but most of the time when the U.S. Department of Justice brings a charge against somebody, it's overwhelming. They know they're going to win, and they more often than not get a guilty plea at some point in this. Here, by putting Andrew on display like this, and God bless the photographer who captured this. Mwah! My compliments to the chef. Because this is what every prosecutor in the United States and all over the world that is going to prosecute these miscreants for the evil that they have done, they want them looking at Andrew's photo because this guy's brother is King of England. These people all have enough money and power to get out of anything. And this is how they look tonight. So put that into the context of the Clintons are going to be deposed by the Congress over their connections to these nutsacks next week. We also have, right about now, we have a did it load up? You'll have to pardon me. I don't want to get rid of that photo. I might want to put this up a few more times here. But for now, it's got to go away in favor of another image of grand juries in the making here. There we go. I think the Andrew situation may be timed around the grand jury that has been convened in the Southern District of Florida, Fort Pierce Division, that is a criminal investigation into the Steele dossier conspiracy. Now, yesterday we had some new information that a new set of subpoenas have gone out from that grand jury. Now, whereas the initial subpoenas supposedly were just around the months surrounding the use of the Steele dossier in an intelligence community assessment, the ICA, that was released out to the public in late December 2016, after Trump was elected and before he took office. The theory of the case here is that the Central Intelligence Agency and the Office of Director of National Intelligence, plus some people in the Obama White House, conspired to put in fraudulent information into an intelligence community assessment. The ICA is a massive product that combines the insights of all 18 agencies of the United States, everything that they know. I say, we want to know about Russia's impact on the 2016 election. Now, they had just done one. September 2016, they said, well, Russia doesn't really have the capacity to affect our election all that much, according to us. And they don't really care which party wins. They got plans for both. And they expect Hillary Clinton to win, which was like a lot of the general public. Russia was kind of right there with us. They're like, well, Hillary's probably going to win. and whatever, we'll make do with whichever president. So that was September 2016. 18 agencies were all part of that. They're like, here's how we see Russia. But there was a conspiracy behind the scenes where you had this British intelligence officer, Christopher Steele, who was working with a Democratic official who was a PR executive, a guy named Chuck Dolan, used to be Massachusetts Democratic Party. Now he worked for Ketchum PR, which worked directly, checks cut from the Kremlin to Ketchum. Their guy, Chuck Dolan, helped write the dossier, along with a guy named Igor Danchenko. Nice American boy. Oh, wait, he's from the former Soviet Union. Those are the guys that wrote the Steele dossier, which was a bunch of nonsense. And it concluded that Trump was either compromised by Russia, and that was rolled into the intelligence community assessment of December 2016, not 8 weeks after the first one comes out. And they say, oh, well, hold on. The September one, that's not the good one. The real one is Putin wants Trump to win. Wink, wink. They really didn't have intelligence for that. And the CIA, we now know that that all these things have been declassified. Reading the tradecraft analysis, which I did a video on this channel, you can go check it out, about the Steele dossier from the CIA perspective, from the Director of National Intelligence perspective, when they were writing the ICA, that they had not enough time to get all the agencies in. They cut out key agencies like the State Department, INR Intelligence Agency, and the Defense Intelligence Agency. They were cut out entirely. The FBI had some contact. Anyway, grand jury's open. They're going to put someone in jail over this. The guy in question here, John Brennan, who's director of the CIA, and he's kind of famously hard-headed as far as personalities go. If I don't really want to have a knockdown, drag-out prosecution of this guy in public, right? This is something you want. You want these problems to go away behind the scenes, for one, which normally they would. But if you do want to charge the director of the CIA, you want him to plead guilty. Now, maybe he's not inclined to plead guilty, right? Well, you show him the picture of Prince Andrew looking, and it's like, this is a message to everyone that, folks, if Prince Andrew can't get out of this, he's been stripped of all his titles, all of his immunities. He's toast. If the wealthiest guy you've ever heard of is toast, what chance do you have? Oh, you worked for the Obama White House. And so this dude, his brother's king of England. He was in the government too. He was trade representative. But he didn't do his job very well. So I think doing Andrew first sets the tone. Who's next? Dwayne asks. I don't know. It almost doesn't matter. Whoever's next is going to know Prince Andrew can't get out of this. And if he can't get out of it, and Epstein's dead, supposedly, Steve Bannon is exposed, Kathy Rumler, who was the general counsel of all of Goldman Sachs, most important investment bank on Wall Street, was Obama's fixer on the inside, apparently vetted his entire cabinet while she was working with Jeffrey Epstein at the time. Yikes, we didn't know that until this week. All right. She just quit her job at Goldman Sachs. So she can't get out of this. You got Casey Wasserman over in Los Angeles. He's being pressured to quit running the Olympics. Well, he's from one of the most powerful Hollywood families out there. He's being pressured to resign. People are starting to go. The French have started raiding office spaces, including Jacques Lang's Arab World Institute. There, they've got they haven't even told us how many spaces that they have raided, but they are looking at Epstein's ties throughout France, particularly trafficking of human beings. All the various private airports in Britain, they are looking through their files going, these guys, they trafficked people through here. Boom, boom, boom. Norway. So Norway has gotten rid of a couple of its diplomats who were closely tied in here, and one former prime minister, and the crown princess is not looking too good. This is just the beginning. And I just read something just before I started the broadcast here about Mandelson and Epstein working on mining in Australia. That they didn't want to know, they didn't want the Australian people to know that it wasn't Australians who were running Australia, which is something people in democracies really want to know, that there isn't some shadowy bunch of child traffickers who secretly run everything, right? With that, I want to interject a little bit of, I guess, personal information here. So it's funny. I've been kind of quiet last year. Since Trump won in 2024, I just decided to be in watch and listen and learn mode, because something was up. It seemed to be in the good direction, but it was not a pattern anyone recognized. But this is just some statistics from my account this month. And this is my Twitter traffic since the Epstein files dropped this last time. Traffic is way up. It's almost like the old days of post game theory. Thank you for all of you who are here today, anyhow. But particularly for those of you who stuck with me through thick and thin, thank you for being here. But things got quiet for a year because the pattern has been a little bit wild here. And a lot of people don't, the Trump administration is making strong moves, very defined moves. And, some of my commentary, it hasn't been time for it. But now that the Epstein files are out, it's funny, I can go back to stuff that I wrote almost 10 years ago. And this is a thread that I threw up about, game theory plus 366 days here. And I started talking about the real deal, about group of rich, powerful men defending a ring of child sex slave trafficking. This is not fun stuff, guys. And people were not ready for this. And by the way, after I wrote this, within a month, I got a brand new renewed push from the corporate media calling me every name in the book, that I'm a conspiracy theorist, that I've never had a career in intelligence, that I'm making it all up. Nothing that was true at all, but it was repeated over and over and over again, such that if you Googled my name in a professional context, if you looked up Eric Garland intelligence, you would look up, let's say you wanted to hire me in my company. I do have to make a living, that you would read Eric Garland intelligence, fraud, kook, lunatic. Well, now that we know how much of this really went at the Epstein network and the Bannon network, and we know how tied into the media they are. I mean, Epstein, after he gets out of prison for child trafficking, Katie Couric comes over. George Stephanopoulos from ABC comes over. Charlie Rose from PBS comes over right to his house. Peggy Siegel, the PR executive who set all this up for Epstein. She calls people over. As soon as he gets out, they all come over. Oh, Katie Couric writes Jeffrey Epstein an email about his rockin' lasagna, right? So these child traffickers have incredible power in the media. So I just happened to look up the other day. I was like, yeah, how long have I been talking about this? This is 2017. This is 9 years ago, right? I come out with an overall positive message in this one particular thread. We can return society to higher ideals. We're going to have to mete out punishments to the full extent of the law, as a warning. The deep state has voluminous intelligence about this because they know what's going on behind the scenes. There are people in intelligence services. There's no question they would know that Jeffrey Epstein and Prince Andrew were working together, and that they were transferring. I mean, unless they were using the absolute best operational security by the Russians or something, then, they would be picked up most likely. I generally think that the guys like Epstein and Bannon and Prince Andrew, they were so powerful. They were so influential in the halls of power. They didn't bother with that much OPSEC. They did what they wanted, and they're like, what are you going to do? We profited from the financial crisis, which it seems like they caused, right? So I write this in 2017. I assume that the deep state, if you will, has voluminous intelligence about this. But, the goal here is to get to meritocracy. That's what I thought. That the big issue here, the real issue was not Trump. It was this network, which, if you remember, Trump 1.0, he had Bannon. When I wrote this, December 12th, 2017, Trump still had Bannon in the White House as his chief strategist, right? So that network, they had essentially installed a president. That was a lot of my assumptions about Trump back then, that he had tried to hire Mike Flynn to be his national security advisor. Flynn was not an appropriate choice for the job, right? That Jared was reportedly asking if they could use Russian communications from the Russian embassy. That was the report in the media, right? This did not inspire confidence. And then you have Bannon, Epstein's buddy here, is the chief strategist. So, it wasn't unreasonable to conclude that Trump was in with these guys, unless his presidency the first time was an accident, if you will. Everyone expected Hillary to win. He won. No one expected him to form a government. And then when he did, he had to take a lot of people he might not have otherwise. It occurs to me that if Trump actually had been a little bit more familiar with the work of Robert S. Mueller and James Comey than he let on, maybe he was, if he was an FBI informant, which people have certainly intimated, then maybe he was stinging his own campaign staff. I ran a campaign in 2023 and 2024, and I learned firsthand that the powers that be will attempt to put campaign staff that have their own mind, they have their own strategy, and someone else's strategy other than the candidates. We caught quite a few people trying that game in 23 and 24. So I don't know if that's how it worked in the Trump campaign from 2015 to 2020, but I've seen it personally. So it's not impossible, I don't think. So yeah, when I wrote about the child trafficking stuff in 2017, I kind of assumed that the Trump administration was the triumph of that network and that's what we had to fight. But maybe not every part of the Trump administration was the same, particularly not the president himself. I don't know. I do know that by 2019, they had arrested Epstein. And then if you look at the timing of it, they arrest Epstein, then he drops dead and he disappears without a trace. And they get Michael Baden, the same celebrity medical examiner who did Nicole Brown Simpson, George Floyd, Michael Brown from Ferguson, and JFK. They get him to do Epstein. And then almost immediately, the COVID virus is unleashed onto the world. Even though Epstein has been working with Bill Gates on all this vaccine stuff, as soon as Epstein's dead, the COVID virus runs all over the planet. I wonder if that's something that happened to Trump. I think the things Trump was in control of is he made sure that they wrapped up that Epstein guy in 2019 and Ghislaine Maxwell not long after. I think the COVID thing might have been out of his control. That's just how I see it right now. I guess we'll find out. We've got a few questions here. I'm gonna tune in. Avocado Toast says, I remember those tweets. If you've been following me for 9-10 years, condolences and thank you. Appreciate it. Real, real good, real good comment here. Russian-Israeli spy Alexander Smirnov, responsible for the fake Burisma scandal, is missing from prison since November. If I go to jail, can I be affiliated with a prison but not housed in it? I haven't checked his status with the Bureau of Prisons. I actually kind of lost track of that case. For those of you who don't remember, I think in the latter part of the Biden administration, they charged this guy, Alexander Smirnov, Israeli national of Russian extract, many such cases. He was lying to the FBI supposedly lying to the FBI about Hunter Biden's relationship with Burisma, the Ukrainian energy company, and he's apparently missing from prison since this past November. It would not, spies get traded back to their country of origin more often than not. What's weird is arresting spies. You want to neutralize spies for a lot of reasons. You generally you want them to keep doing their spy thing, and you watch what they want. That's counterintelligence. You track them, you learn everything about what they're interested in, because that tells you about what their bosses want. And that's a very sophisticated thing. And then you generally don't charge them or you don't prosecute them all the way. Frequently, you'll get a charge. And then when we charge some of their dudes, whatever country it is, they'll charge a couple of ours. And we'll swap them back. Case in point, if you've ever seen the Americans television show, it's based on a guy named Don Heathfield, a.k.a. Andrei Bezrikov. I have had lunch with Mr. Bezrikov when I was targeted by him and didn't realize he wasn't really Canadian. Don't worry, I've talked to the FBI about it. Fun stuff. When they hit my buddy Don Heathfield, they hit him with 18 U.S. Code 951, failure to register as a foreign agent with the Attorney General's office. And he never went to trial because they put him on a plane. They interrogated him. They put him on a plane to Vienna, and they swapped with, I believe, Sergei Skripal, the guy who got hit with Novichok in Britain. So it would be more typical than not for Smirnov to be traded back, assuming that he was not just a fantasist. I don't think anybody said in public who Smirnov worked for. Did he work for the Israeli Defense Forces? Was he some form of asset of Mossad? Did he work for the SVR or the FSB? Did he work for the North Koreans? Did he work for the Salvation Army? I don't know. That's above our pay grade, ain't it? So not sure what happened there, but I didn't know he was missing. That does happen from time to time. Thank you for that comment. That's fascinating stuff. Flynn, hey guys, I went to the FSB headquarters and they gave me a T-shirt and this memo to give you. What should we do with it? That's what he did, right? Like you're joking, Dwayne, but isn't that kind of what he did? He got invited to GRU headquarters. I think he went to the group. Maybe he went to FSB. I forget. It's not uncommon. Those guys, the Russians apparently invite everyone of a high rank. Please come, have really good vodka, play us in chess. And then everyone says, thank you so much. And they don't go. Except Mike Flynn went. What can you say? It's been 10 plus years with Mike Flynn. I remember him from his DC days when he was scandalizing everybody. He's a weird guy, and he's been up to a lot of weird stuff. One of the things I find fascinating right now, paying attention to what's going on the conservative side of politics, is watching the conservatives get rid of Bannon and Flynn out of the Make America Great Again movement. It's frankly super hopeful. That is the stuff that makes me go, look, we are all infiltrated in all these countries. We are infiltrated by provocateurs, agents provocateurs, provocators who are just there to make democracy impossible. And they want us fighting, and they want people taking unreasonable positions, and they want everybody in lockstep, and they're going to drive each other they want us to shoot each other. They want us to yell at each other. They want us to fight when we're home with our families in the holidays. And watching the MAGA types go, wait a minute, I want solid borders. I want stable societies. I want compassionate, um, you know, benefits programs so people don't fall through the cracks in the United States. But I don't want to go into Somalia. And you know what? I want healthy food, and I want an energy policy that makes sense, and I want jobs and all that. Just classic conservative stuff. People go, "That's what I want." What's this Bannon guy on about, or what's Flynn on about here, and all their garbage, and which we now know is tied pretty tightly to Jeffrey Epstein and child trafficking. Knowing that they are going at that crew, the most noxious part of their political faction, I think, that they're going to get rid of these folks without any help from liberals. That makes my day. Because I think when you have honest people on the right, honest people in the center, honest people on the left, we can all talk to each other. If there's enough rational adults in the room, but not when you have people who are paid off by the same pot of dirty offshore money, by people who are getting paid to start fights. And it's taken years, right? We've had some of these provocative movements for decades, but they're the Department of Justice just announced that they got the money behind Antifa tracked. Since we know that FinCEN was on some of the cases in Minnesota recently, that bespeaks foreign powers and offshore money. So I think we're going to expose the role of this offshore money controlled by the Chinese, the Russians, and others, funding us fighting on U.S. soil. Hey, I want to fight with our jerks. I want to get into an argument with our unreasonable uncles. Not arguing the agents of Beijing and Moscow. We have enough jerks. I'm one of them. I want to argue with our jerks, not their jerks. And so I think we're getting there. Got some great new questions here. Almost like Trump's first term was to surround himself with the swamp like the good bait he is. I mean, you have to, anybody that is neck deep in the mafia and the Russian mafia for that long and never goes to prison. You know who else is like that? Is like Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden is constantly hanging out, and boy, does he lean into the part, right? He actually does the tequila, does the cocaine, does the crack, does all this stuff with all these gangster criminals from around the world, and they all go to prison except for him, right? Trump has been, neck deep in Cosa Nostra and Russian mafia and Chinese money and everything else. And, I think we talked about this in the last episode. I've actually read the Mueller report cover to cover. I've actually talked to some of the people who wrote it, right? And they did a great job. They caught all kinds of scumbags in that. And they asked very directly, is there anything on Trump? They're like, no. Now, it didn't absolve him of every crime. Who knows? Maybe he abused the postal service or somewhere along the way or whatever. It's not to say he's a perfect person, but in terms of what they were looking at, did Trump do anything in particular? Well, no. And we now know that the assessment from the intelligence community, this is shameful, as I've been pointing out, that the assumption that Trump, they wanted Trump in there because they had something over him, that was false. Which changes the logic of that entirely. It's like, well, if Vladimir Putin didn't really want Trump in there, then what's going on here? Now, there's a bunch of people around Trump who did a bunch of bad stuff. Paul Manafort gave American voter data to Konstantin Kilimnik, who's a Russian spy. That's naughty. You're not supposed to do that. That was Trump's campaign manager. And somebody pushed for him to hire Manafort as a campaign manager. Strange, right? But yes, his first term was to surround himself with the swamp. You had Eric Prince in there, and Betsy DeVos, his sister. They're not there anymore. You had Elaine Chao, Mitch McConnell's wife, who was in there and I think wanted to throw the Insurrection Act on January 6th and maybe overturn the government forever. She's not around. Ryan Zinke, he's not around. Jared Kushner's still around, right? His kids aren't. It's fascinating. The cast of characters in Trump 2, almost completely different than Trump 1. I mean, yes, of course, 90% of the administration is Marco Rubio in a variety of costumes. But yeah, the first term seems like more of a sting operation than not in some ways, if that's what it was. But when you know that Epstein had Kathy Rumler in a key position. He had Larry Summers in the Obama administration, right? And then Trump gets into office and he's got Bannon in there. Like Epstein always had top-level spies in key positions, making key decisions about the economy, about who's in the cabinet. It's like both parties were infiltrated by this elite network and at its mercy. Pretty scary. Can you imagine going through your whole life, doing everything perfect, such that you become president of the United States, and when you get in there, you're basically told that someone else is really president, not you? I think that's something everybody, that's an experience a lot of presidents have. I think Obama had it, and I think Trump had it in his first term. I think he's president now, man. I think he's got a kitchen cabinet behind the scenes, and I don't know exactly who it is. They have a real defined plan that they didn't have in 2017. So I don't know. We may be experiencing the first American presidency in a long time. Roger fucking Stone. I'm just going to leave that up there because he's very funny. Incidentally, I was scheduled to be on a program with Roger Stone and Mike Flynn's brother. And I think Mike Flynn's brother dissolved into shouting profanity at me, so it wasn't going to work. But I actually sent Roger Stone a picture of, how Roger Stone has a picture of his back he's got a Nixon tattoo on it. I have a friend who's a graphic designer. I had her do Roger Stone's face, and I made it look like I have a tattoo of Roger Stone on my back, which I sent to Roger Stone. And I don't have the tattoo, but I did send that to Roger Stone. So Roger Stone blocked me on Twitter. It's a really dumb career I have, but I'm kind of happy with that part. Really good question. Is Leslie Wexner getting deported? I don't know to where, but I think he'll probably stay in Iowa there. The Mueller investigation. Hey, Jojo, good to see you again. The Mueller investigation was limited in scope with what they were allowed to investigate. That doesn't mean Trump didn't do anything with the Russians. Correct, you are. The Rosenstein, letter that shaped exactly what they could look at was very limited in terms of what they were allowed to go at. It was not a complete counterintelligence review, which makes sense too. Counterintelligence is not supposed to be done for the general public. There's a lot of stuff people just wouldn't understand, and that may be elitist, but it's also pretty true, I think. The Mueller investigation was limited in scope, and yet they turned out 800 pages of look at all the Russians we found, and people messing around trying to get Hillary's emails and WikiLeaks and the GRU and the hackers and the DNC. It was limited. Like, for example, it didn't look enough at the insiders in the DNC who may have been the actual source of that hack, not the Russian military. Though the Russian, it might be a distinction without a difference. The Russian military may have had human insiders in the Democratic Party, and it just wasn't time to talk about that yet. A lot of people think that hacking is we let the computer chips, decode the quantum cryptography, something, when sometimes, they got a guy on the inside blackmailed and he leaves the door open for everyone. Those are both really good techniques for hacking. And it wasn't necessarily time to talk about how all of that election went down. Nevertheless, I think they did a great job. And I think we've sort of forgotten the implications of it. Maybe we're going to learn more about it. If they're going to prosecute those guys over the Steele dossier, hopefully we look at other ways that our elections were affected by these covert operations that were nasty. I think we need to get to another side. And I think the SAVE Act saying, look, everyone needs an ID to vote. We need to know that everybody who voted here was a citizen, had a right to vote in it, and that we just need more operational security in these elections, I think is true. And I think if Facebook and Meta and the credit card companies can all know this data about us on our buying habits, there's no way that we can't correlate whether you're a U.S. citizen, whether you had a right to vote, and did you vote. That's not that hard an information technology question. So maybe we'll get to it. I don't know. Oh, got a lot of questions here. What's the involvement of Cantor Fitzgerald, 9/11, Trump, the Epstein ring / Russia? Well, that wasn't a huge question or anything. So we get this guy, Howard Lutnick, who apparently had the place next to Epstein's. And Lutnick, lost 2 floors of his company. Like, his whole company got blown up in the World Trade Center bombing of 9/11. And he just happened to not be at work that day. He took his kids to school for like the first time ever and just happened to be outside of it. Trump even kind of made a sideways glance at this and poked him and was like, aren't you lucky that you missed it? Sort of implying that maybe there was something else to it. And now we know that Lutnick and Epstein had more of a connection than he said. Well, so there's more going on there than he said. What else is going on? I don't know. Something. So we'll get to it. Seems like a lot of back doors are left open on purpose in tech. Yeah, I talked to a source who's telling me about his attempts to fix the bot problem in social media, and that his boss just happened to be present at 3 of these companies that experienced massive data breaches. Coincidence? Who knows? Oh, so we got one account with a ton of questions, but they're all good. Why can't we use banking level security to vote digitally? We can. People don't want it. And it's going to cut some people out for a little while, but we can solve that problem too. We went to the freaking moon. We designed the computer chip. We can figure out how everyone gets to vote. It's not that hard. You mean Rod Rosenstein, who also went way back working with Barr, Comey, Mueller, and more of the DOJ in the 1990s? Yes, that Rosenstein. Though he then got out and went to work for the Israeli spyware company Pegasus, which looked really dodgy. I got to withhold my judgment there. Who's who at the zoo? I'm not sure, but there's a lot of these folks who were at a certain level of the Department of Justice and I think they were all in a position to know what Trump's real position was through all of this. The only guy who's really said it from a position of authority, other than Trump himself, or to a degree, the Epstein files speaking for him, that they've got the documents that show that Trump talked to the police and said, "Thank God you're going after these scumbags, and make sure you look at Ghislaine. She's the evil one." There's that, but you've got Mike Johnson, who's the Speaker of the House, who said, "Look, he was an FBI informant. He tried to take Epstein down," and then they kind of pulled that one back. But there's no accidents with guys that sharp. Sorry. So are there other people who were, essentially Attorney General, the acting Attorney General, the acting Director of the FBI? Do they know what Trump was the whole time? Yeah, they do. They had to. It was their job. Did they make specific choices based on that? No doubt. Do we know everything they know? No, we don't. Are we gonna? Maybe. Well, which brings us to another point. So I want to interject something I had prepared for everyone here. I have a thesis that I'm putting out in my professional newsletters called the Systemics Quarterly Brief. That's for clients, people who run investment funds and companies and stuff like that. Where my thesis for the year 2026 is that we are in the golden age of enforcement. And what you're seeing more largely here is you're seeing an old system break down in favor of a new one. And I think what you're seeing is a once in a lifetime transition to the laws on the books as they're written in the statute being enforced for real. I'm calling this the golden age of enforcement. One of the things, one of the cycles that I've identified here is how we go from real life, normal life as we perceive it, which I use some fancy terms here, so strap in with me. Systemic stasis. Systemics is the concept that my firm uses to refer to the system of systems, all the systems that interact with each other to create what we call reality. That you have systemic stasis, the way things are, and then you'll have one or more disruptive events that start changing how we think about the world. And then there's a systemic reaction. That reaction becomes more and more coherent and becomes a reordering of the world. And then that becomes a new reality, which achieves stasis. So I think what you have now is that cycle is followed when it comes to law enforcement stuff, where people are like, "You mean I'm not allowed to traffic children?" No, you're not. You mean I can't create a shadow banking system using offshore entities? We wish you wouldn't. You mean we can't have a fake democracy here where, an elite controls the outcome of these elections? No, you can't. So I think there is a disruptive evolutionary cycle here that is specific to law enforcement, where you have latent impunity, where people are breaking the law all over the place, but they don't pay the price. So they may or may not even know that something is illegal. They just do it. Or this is what I call St. Louis society, where everybody commits 5 felonies before they get out of bed. And no one they've ever known has gotten caught. So what do you mean illegal? What does that even mean? And instead of a disruptive event, there's an exposure event where somebody is revealed for their real activities. In this case, you've got Prince Andrew. He's exposed for being in contact with this child trafficker, right? And you have an enforcement and expansion where people go, actually, no, that is illegal, and we're going to start prosecuting. And you see this in a variety of areas with the Department of Justice over the last 7 to 10 years, meaning it started at the end of Trump 1.0 continued through Biden very often and is reaching its terminus under Trump 2.0. That in the examples that we have gathered, there isn't as much difference between Trump and Biden as you might think, where it counts, where they're going after cryptocurrency scammers, where they're going after systematic child abuse, where they're going after Medicaid fraud, where they're going after foreign agencies or foreign agents who represent hostile spy services. Take, for example, social media, where they are victimizing children, victimizing people with mental issues. They are being weaponized. They're being subjected to psychological operations. And these people are suffering real harm. They commit suicide. They are doing things that are not in their interest. You start enforcing the expansion, then you have cascading liability. No, actually, you are liable for this. And then the world starts reordering itself structurally. And then you get to a new stasis eventually. That's happening all over the place. Mark Zuckerberg was in court in Los Angeles today, being forced to talk about the addictive qualities of his platforms. And you've had this platform immunity. Well, hey, all we do is make $1 billion off it. It's of no interest to us what happens to you on it, which is great, but for them for a little while. But what happens is these are new technologies, and the law only develops around things that complaints that have been made to the court. If you understand how precedent case law works, somebody has to go to a court looking for justice. The judge decides one way or the other. And generally in the American system, somebody has to say, I don't like how that judge ruled. I'm going to appeal this to a higher court, a circuit court of appeals, or a Supreme Court, whether it's at the state level or at the federal level. And the response to the upper judges, the upper courts, making a comment on what that lower judge did correctly or incorrectly. Either they affirm the decision or they reverse it and remand it for further proceedings. That's what creates the law. And where there is a thicket of law is property, because we have all had a system of owning property in the Anglo-American world for centuries. And people are notoriously complaining about what the guy next to him is doing, or they left it to their kids, but they left it to their 3 kids. The kids don't get along. So there's an incredible body of law in property and real estate. Social media, that's 10, 20 years old. It's in its infancy. So it's taken us time to even say, all right, my kid killed himself because ChatGPT told him he should poison himself to get over something. Or, Facebook was used to psyop all of the voters in 2016. And I think I didn't get the president I wanted, or I got the president I didn't want, or whatever. Who's liable for that? That takes a few seconds here. And I think our adversaries were trying to rush everything and try and grab control of our system as quickly as they could. That's why I perceived such urgency in 2016. It's why I wrote like an idiot on Twitter, just with no plan. I'm not saying what I thought what I was writing was idiotic, but I was just like, all right, let's just start talking. And then all the notifications went off. I went, wow, everyone's really listening to this. I was reacting to the alarm, to the panic that was going on more broadly. Everyone was so scared and confused. And I said, this has a feel like there's some network that's trying to seize control of our institutions here. And I think we now know what network that was. I think that was the Bannon Epstein, Prince Andrew people trying to choke out democracy all around the world. I think it's pretty bad, guys. And it's taken us a while to figure out, who's responsible for this. And it takes time in the courts. And I think the bad guys I think the bad guys wanted to put their judges in, their handpicked ideological judges in, and never have to, pay for any of what they're doing to kids or to our democracy or, people's health, any of it. But we have survived, and we seem to be turning the corner, and the criminal prosecutions are proceeding, and the civil liability lawsuits are proceeding. And I think that there's another cycle here that I call the prosecution immunity decay cycle. And we are seeing this with Prince Andrew tonight, that this starts at first with getting away with it, that bad guys do bad guy things. Nobody knows they're doing it. They're getting away with it, and they're having fun. I'm terrible at committing crimes and stealing from people, so I don't really know. They seem to have fun. I gather felonies are a lot of fun because a lot of people do them, and they don't like being caught for them, and they don't like being told they need to stop. Please see St. Louis, Missouri. But apparently it's a lot of fun. So it starts with getting away with it. Then you go to discovery. Oops, we were working with the Russians. We were working with. There's an initial scandal. Then there's some form of precedent set, like, oh, that's illegal? Yes, and this guy's going to jail over it. And then all of a sudden there's the perception that nobody's safe. And then there becomes the new normal. Only stupid people would try this thing. Like, I think there's probably fewer folks out there than there were in 2015 when this company, Cambridge Analytica, went to all these political consultants and said, hey, we can psyop your population from offshore and get them to believe all this crazy stuff. And they had Israeli counterparts in a company known as Psy Group. And they had like a wet work black ops team that was comprised of like military veterans that would go blackmail people. I've seen the presentations. It was crazy. This is crazy. 2015, 2016. John Bolton paid for Cambridge Analytica. Roy Blunt from Missouri paid for Cambridge Analytica. The Mercers and Steve Bannon's people, they paid for Cambridge Analytica. I don't think anyone would try that now because we've had the Mueller report. It was exposed. There was a scandal. Now there's a precedent set. Not only will we, now it's interesting that we haven't actually prosecuted Cambridge Analytica, but maybe we needed to get our British counterparts softened up here because we have a very peculiar relationship. We call it the special relationship. Let's call it the peculiar relationship. We had to get them to a certain spot, but the precedents set, we will track you down. I mean, we indicted the Russian intelligence officers down to their middle patronymic names. We're like, we know who you are on the other side of that computer. Crazy. So now, if you're going to set up a political warfare operation in another country, and you're going to try and target an American election using PayPal and, Fiverr and Craigslist and Twitter, we're going to catch you. So that's the new normal, that only stupid people would try that thing, though. And I think that you'll see some of the resistance to this. It has a decay curve to it. And you'll see it in a variety of areas, some of it political, some of it technology, some of it economics. There's getting away with it, committing felonies, having super fun. Public investigation, all of a sudden people know that the public's looking, and then you get the screeching complaints about politicization. How dare you suggest that I shouldn't have gone up to the ICE agents and started shoving them in New Jersey, said congressional or Congresswoman LaMonica McIver. This is just Donald Trump trying to get us. Like, okay, but, indictment, arrest. She was indicted and arrested for this. And then you get the political delay, procedural stall. There was both with her, Congresswoman McIver, as well as Judge Hannah Dugan, who we've dealt with on this channel. Here, that she was the judge that tried to interfere with ICE operations by sneaking the guy they were looking at. She tried sneaking him out the side door and then sending the ICE agents on a goose chase inside the courthouse, where they had every legal right to be. And there was, everyone was so angry. There was the procedural stall. There was a motion to dismiss the indictment, both for Dugan and for LaMonica McIver. And those were not granted. Those were denied. And Dugan's been to trial, and she's now been convicted. LaMonica McIver's going to go to trial. She'll probably be convicted. And you can look at any number of things. It could be illegal sports betting. It could be Medicaid fraud. It could be the use of cryptocurrencies. Oh, this is just an attempt to crack down on innovation. No, you're laundering money for the cartels. You're going to go to prison over this. So you get institutional stress, constitutional challenge, and then remand, trial, conviction, and then enforcement is normalized. That you are going to get caught more often than not. And this takes a second. This whole decay curve that I'm describing here, this takes a few years. I remember after the 2016 election, you had all these alt-left types who were tied into the New York City media industry, who tried to say that, what the Russians did, that's just like marketing. It's just trolling. It's having fun. Well, no, actually, it was military intelligence science. It was an attack. It was designed by a hostile military that wished to harm us all. But there was public investigation into this, and I played a role in that, where I publicized, and I was like, no, this is not about Hillary's Wisconsin buttery mails. This is, we were being attacked online by hostile foreign powers that want super bad things for all of us. And part of the resistance to that, in 2016 and 17, you had a network of people who made fun of it, who defamed me personally, who defamed anybody who would stand up to these foreign powers. They said, this is just trolling, or it's no different than advertising. And it's very different than advertising. And trolling, when you're talking about, propaganda that goes along the lines of Soviet intelligence methods that have been that were refined, trying to sabotage the workers' rights movements going back to 1850. That's the Okhrana. That all the Russian intelligence stuff around this, trying to cause fights in these political movements, that's an attempt to harm workers' rights that was innovated by Russian intelligence in the 19th century under the czars, right? So you have all these supposed communist types, socialist types online who are trying to run interference for the literal Russian government. And they're trying to make light of techniques that were designed to harm workers' unions. Quite ironic, is it not? That was 2016, 2017. People came out and online. I got savaged online once I got popular. I was like, you're making it all, the Russians aren't that powerful, and Russia has a right, every country has a right to intervene in our politics as much as they want. And it's 10 years later, and just people don't feel that way anymore. Like, the folks that have been involved in this game have been exposed, and in many cases they have been prosecuted. And it's just not as cool to invite the Russians, Israelis, Saudis, and North Koreans in to mess with our elections as it used to be. This took 10 to 20 years of hard grown-up work. And you had naysayers. We have freedom of speech. People got to say what they wanted here, sometimes on the payroll of foreign powers, sometimes just because it was their opinion. But here we are 10 years later, and now it's just not that cool to mess with our elections anymore. So we're making progress here, and I'm actually actually quite hopeful. We are the nonsense propaganda stuff is not taking as much time to get exposed. I have another wonderful example since my accounts on Twitter is banging again. Here we had this went viral today. A little data point on this guy Don Huffines, who apparently I don't know how to say that, Huffiness or whatever. Don here, though, he's running for comptroller in Texas. He apparently bought the Epstein Ranch, and he's digging up stuff there. I mean, this is an active crime scene, and bro bought the Epstein Ranch, and he's got construction materials there. He's rebuilding it, and he's going to make it into a biblical something. He's going to try and spread light or something. But it turns out he hangs out with Steve Bannon. So, the story about this Don character taking over Epstein's ranch and him being exposed as being part of the Bannon Epstein network, I'm going to say that was like 24 to 48 hours. That's not long. I mean, exposing the Russians messing around in our politics took a lot of effort, took a lot of time. But now it doesn't take very long at all for people to realize, hey, wait a minute, this is the same bunch of jerks. So progress, people. We are making progress. For one, we're talking about child trafficking, even though it's like the grossest subject ever. Trust me, we haven't even gotten to like the rough stuff, I'm afraid. It's not fun. But we're doing it. Like big boys and girls, we're doing it. And the amount of time that these bad guys can put out their disinformation and stand up their fake assets here, we're getting rid of them in no time flat. Good job, everyone. I'm proud. Let's go to some questions here. Do you remember when JFK wanted silver to stop backing currency because it was potentially volatile and had industrial uses? And then his head did the thing when his head blew up. Yes, and he also tried to get us out of Vietnam, and he wanted to like break the CIA into 1,000 pieces, and then he was dead. And then the first thing that LBJ did literally was get our military advisors back in Vietnam, get the CIA back where they wanted to go, and then he didn't die. Yes, I do remember that, actually. Let's see. The Sable Wing, good to see you. I think that until people have become aware that we don't have to accept corruption as the norm in society, we haven't been able to work to fix it. It's good to see that change. So I spent 15 years living in St. Louis, where the notion like public corruption is just how everything's done. It is as close to a third world country as you can imagine. Like the notion that you would care about the U.S. Constitution or care about federal statute is just bizarre to people. Like the idea that, like, wait a minute, but I have a right to that because I'm a U.S. citizen. Bizarre. The idea that maybe you shouldn't launder money for the mafia is utterly bizarre. I mean, you can't even really argue with people about it. Like they're not there to argue with you. So until people come, people go, we don't have to live like this. We don't have to have a parasitic elite that steals our children, throws us out of our house every 5 to 10 years on some made up banking crisis, and starts a bunch of wars that don't need to happen. Until we become aware that we don't have to live like that, we're going to keep living like that. But I think people are really getting it, that's wild, man. There are a lot of the last 3 to 4 generations, people who grew up in modern warfare. Can you imagine the people who saw the First World War? The Civil War in America was no fun, right? But the First World War was the first global industrialized set of atrocities. And, we have been kind of living in that moment, I think. I think this is one long historical moment. And I think we're just now getting a hold of it. And we might start looking at who is behind that. And it might sound like conspiracy theory. Like, was there one set of elites behind the notion of world war and war profiteering. Maybe we'll see. But I think we're in the right direction here. We were attacked via psychological warfare, and a lot of Americans helped. Absolutely. We did an episode here on Epstein's ties to Moscow, which were legion, but his ties to everywhere are like super intense. It was very interesting. We had a lot of, I think, Russian types who were like, you are clearly in the pocket of the Israelis, which is highly, if you know about me getting into a row with the Anti-Defamation League and the Israelis in 2023 and 2024, you know that's highly ironic. You're covering up for the Israelis. No, I'm not. Epstein was hanging out with Ehud Barak. Robert Maxwell was buried in Israel. But it's beside the point. The problems that we have are with Americans. Now, Ghislaine Maxwell's not American. Jeffrey Epstein was. Steve Bannon's American. These guys work with foreign powers, but they are American. And what they're doing is not good. This took a lot of people had to invite Russian intelligence in to mess with us. So another comment from the Rogue Cow here. They feed misogyny to drive men against their own mothers and wives. Great way to kill a culture. Getting us to fight. All that incel stuff. Like feeding these very primeval, basic tensions that we have between the genders or the very notion of gender, right? You're talking about creating tensions that no one will be able to really fix. It absolutely fits in Russian and Chinese military science about how to mess with your enemies in a long war. And that's why lots of us who understand how psychological warfare works and their warfare doctrines, we know that that's warfare. And I think we're just now starting to defend against it. So Massey gets Yas money, says Fermenti LLC. Yes, Thomas Massey is a very interesting guy. I think his mother was a specialist in Russian affairs, if memory serves. But if he's getting money from Jeff Yas is very, very Israeli. But he's tied into this sort of globalist takeover thing. So Rouhana, when you look at his backers, are just the backbone of Silicon Valley. Wilson Sonsini, Alphabet, Facebook, all them. The notion that this is where the revolutionaries is coming from is kind of fatuous. I think a lot of these characters who are trying to steal the narrative away from the Department of Justice, right? Because that's what's happening with Massey and Khanna, and when the Democrats tear off and go to Wexner's to do a deposition, they're trying to steal the the operational tempo of the Department of Justice, and take it so that they can control it. For politics, I guess it works, maybe to get reelected, but I see these folks as kind of troublesome. I don't see a lot of use to their to some of their activities, though. The Epstein Transparency Act, I don't know, it's working wonders. We have all this information out there that's tying this together, and it's wild. It's an amazing time to be alive. So. Hello, we have, what do you make of the theater we saw with Bondi and Congress? Pam Bondi is not the smoothest old DC operator, right? Most of the people that are in the Trump administration, Kash Patel, Dan Bongino's now departed back to podcast land, but same kind of idea. Pete Hegseth and Bondi these are not super smooth Washington, DC operators. These are more state level or podcast level kind of operators. Nevertheless, what's happening is really serious. right? DOJ is prosecuting stuff it's never done before. And this Epstein thing is probably the biggest criminal and counterintelligence investigation in American history. And Bondi is the attorney general. Now, they get her on, they get her under oath, and they yell at her, and then she yells right back. I think they know the game. I think it's highly irritating to have to watch. The Dow's at 50,000. Like, do you know what did they ask? I think it was Tom Homan, or maybe it was one of the other officials from the DHS. How does it feel knowing you're going to go to hell? I mean, okay. So you got 3 to 8 hours of viral video content for that. Meanwhile, the investigations are moving forward, right? So I think the theater that we see bonding in Congress, there's part of the resistance phase here. There's people trying to drag the actual change that's coming from the Trump administration. And all they can do is add some heat and friction. That's it. That's what they're doing here. I think strategically, the Trump people are winning. I think Trump's policies are coherent and they're being executed with a lot of energy and precision. So I think what the theater we saw with Bondi in Congress was theater, very annoying theater. This is not a question, it's a comment. Private military should not exist. I agree. And I just watched a movie, hadn't seen it, can't believe it made it by me. It was one of the least known John Cusack films called War Inc. Came out in 2008. It's a takeoff. It's almost like a sequel to Grosse Pointe Blank, which is one of the greatest spy movies in history, about a CIA assassin who goes home to his high school reunion. This is another CIA operator who's working for essentially a Halliburton or Blackwater type contractor. And this was, I think it only made $1 million at the box office. It was a flop. It is aged very well. It's 18 years old, and it is about kind of the perverseness of that era. And I don't think audiences were ready for it. But I think they might be ready for it now, that the American way of war, where we don't have defined goals and we drag these things out for a decade and a half, I think that's really, that was not a good American way of war. I think the way we're doing it now, where we go in and we arrest your dictator and we shoplift him back to Manhattan where he stands trial, and then we prop your government back up and go, all right, we'll see you next week. The head of our CIA will be down to tell you what's up. It's pretty effective. Whatever's going on in Iran right now, it's like, look, you're going to behave, and this is how this is going to go. And if not, we just brought every plane we have into your neighborhood. You saw what we did in Venezuela, so behave. That is the opposite of the private military thing. We have a return of hard power, of realpolitik, and of very clear and convincing statements. And war is terrible, and the world can be terrible, but it can't be any worse than what was going on through Republican and Democratic administrations, because Obama didn't put an end to the Afghanistan stuff, and he surged people into Iraq. He kept the problem going. Now we seem to be turning the page on how we handle these things. And there was all this, we're going to be at war forever. No, we're not. We ain't going to be at war for the afternoon. We marched in at 4 a.m. into Caracas onto a military base, discombobulated everybody. We didn't take a single casualty. We didn't take any of our material. None of our material got hit. We shoplifted the president and stole him and took him back to New York. Done. No casualties. That is a different way of doing war. I just found out Oleg Deripaska was in the Epstein files. Oleg Deripaska, man, is everywhere. He was Putin's wallet. And yeah, almost everybody's working for Deripaska in one way or another who was involved in some of this gross stuff. So let's see. Got people reposting the stream. God bless you. Thank you so much. How is the Gaza Peace Board not against USC Title 22? I don't know the answer to that. What a great question. Now I'm going to have to go learn it, but I don't know. Somebody else has seen War Inc., apparently. Apparently, it's the two of us. But I'm glad you liked it. I suspect there are many people with their backs against the wall as prosecutions increase. In that case, anything they can do to delay the inevitable will be tried. And that brings us back. Right. Boop. That brings us back to this image. How it started, how it's going. It's like you just want to tell these people in the starkest manner possible, stop helping yourselves to our children. Stop messing with other people's kids. Stop being a sociopath. Stop trying to take over the world and stop trying to hurt everybody, because that'll do. It's enough. We have all these smartphones and we have all this digital data that is all court ready, right? There's more evidence of what your life is really like, from the purchases you make to the comments you make. We do so much of this digitally that the truth is out there. It can be had. And the truth is, these are some evil sons of bitches. These people are nasty. And they've been doing nasty things to us. And it's time for them to pay, and they've never paid. But they're gonna. So yeah, I think they took Andrew just to show everybody, no, there is no escape. So when they come, I don't know what the plan is for President Clinton, but he clearly did some bad things with some bad people. And he probably ought to admit to a few of them. Not all of them, probably. Probably some things that he can't tell us because he was president at the time. But he did some other things he can admit to. And we can move on with this. We're about to drop indictments on former director of the Central Intelligence Agency. Probably best that he just go, yeah, I shouldn't have tried to bullshit everybody about the Russians wanting Trump. That's my bad. I'm sorry. He's an old man, John Brennan. He's not a young guy. And he betrayed us for reasons that I don't know, and I don't really care. But I do want him to admit that he was part of this conspiracy, because what he did was very naughty. And I don't know as we're going to be able to get into all of that with everybody. We all have things to do. We have a country to run here. We have, an ecological system or two to fix on the planet. I think what we need to do is a friend of mine said, and I put this up on my Twitter, I want to live in a world where the facts and the truth are the same for once. And that's what we're looking for here, that there's some truth. Like, Trump got elected, and there were a lot of people around him trying to gin up this fake story about Russia. Now, personally, I think that they were planning on humiliating the FBI and CIA when Hillary was president. And they made this cockamamie thing up about Trump so that they could then turn it back on the FBI and the CIA and get them under Hillary's control more. I think that was the plan. I'm not saying it's a great plan. It's not my idea. I think that was their idea. And as a result, they screwed around a lot. And they had our Central Intelligence Agency enter into our election as their own factor. They were their own factor without any legal authority to do that. We do not give them that power to do all the covert stuff they do to affect our elections, but they did at the highest level. It wasn't the whole agency, and a lot of guys, particularly the analysts, were horrified by all this. But John Brennan did, and I think we just need for him to go, yeah, you're right, I did that. John Bolton was committing espionage. He was spreading our intelligence to people like this, much like Andrew was spreading intelligence to Jeffrey Epstein. They were all sharing. They had no right to do that. Probably best that they go, you're right, I'll plead guilty. And then we can go, see, we had a bunch of jerks who were doing this stuff, and they got caught. So we can move on. So this was great. Thank you for being here. We'll do it again soon. I think we are headed for some very interesting times ahead here. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thank you for all your questions and thank you for everything. And I will see you in all the places that I normally see you. Take care.